Hello, and welcome back to Man Enough. I'm Justin Baldoni here with the incredible Liz Plank, Jamie Heath, and the one and only, my dear friend, Mr. Jay Shetty. Dude, we're finally doing this.
We're doing it. Thank you for having me, guys.
Have you ever been on a podcast before?
I've never been on a podcast with three co-hosts before.
So this is not your
So this
first
is special.
podcast.
This is very special.
I just wanted this to be your first podcast ever, but
He's never been on any podcast.
This is the first time I've been on a podcast which has such a beautiful, clear purpose to help people redefine who they want to be in the world. And so it is the first time. And it's the first time that I'm being interviewed by Justin. I've had him on the podcast before, which has been really special. It's the first time we're meeting.
indeed.
And Liz, I've been a huge fan of for like the last 5 years. I've just been name dropping all her video names since we met. And I'm so grateful to get to meet you today, Jamie. So
Indeed.
thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
God, Jay, you're just special. You're a special man. It's like you meet people that you know were sent by God with a purpose to just like make it a little better. And you're one of those people.
You are a best-selling author. You are a former monk and a purpose coach. You're the host of an incredibly popular podcast, On Purpose, speaking of purpose, which has more than 64 million downloads. Your YouTube videos have been streamed 2 billion times. That's like a third of the planet. And
I hope you find success one day.
Maybe one day you can be on a podcast.
when
You guys.
you finished your studies, you turned down jobs in the business world to go live in India and become a full-time monk. That inspired your book, Think Like a Monk. It came out in September 2020 during this pandemic, and I know you've talked about it so much. Hopefully we will get to talk about it and so many more other things. But it's sold out, so many copies. And with that in mind, I'd love to welcome you to our show, to Man Enough.
Thank you for embarrassing me.
I know, isn't it awkward to just hear your, even a portion of your life story and your successes, right?
Yeah,
Your perceived successes.
Well,
I get it.
I value everything you just shared. Like, I'm so grateful and blessed to have that. But I have this practice that we were trained in as monks, that when someone notices something good about you, even what you were just saying earlier, you accept it and you receive it, but you think of the person that helped you get that skill or ability or habit or practice that helped you develop that intentionally or unintentionally, and you pass it on to them. So I love doing this because I can just sit here and think about all my teachers and monk teachers and pass it back to them and thank them in my heart. So it's an opportunity to be thankful and grateful. So
I love that. You've been on the podcast for 35 seconds and you've already dropped something that's helpful to me, because I have a hard time accepting compliments. I just have a hard time with it. And I love that I can accept it and thank somebody. I can do that.
yeah, it's simple.
I can do that because I stand on the shoulder of giants, right? I appreciate that. All right. All right. Thank you.
And I
Okay.
noticed too, before I hope you don't mind me pointing this out, before we started, I saw you, I looked over you and your eyes were closed and you just took like 30, 50, 60 seconds. Is that something that you learned during your
Monastery?
What?
Monastery? During your time in
During
monastery?
your time being a monk.
Yeah, it was the idea of using any opportunity before you begin something, you're setting your intention for service. So before you begin anything in the day, whether it's eating or even sleeping or spending time with someone, we literally are serving humanity through Justin and all of you and the incredible work that Man Enough does. So to just set your intention and be like, okay, let me get out of my own way. Let me be a channel. Let me serve. Let me, not.
So it's not really a prayer.
It's a prayer. You could call it a prayer. Absolutely. Yeah, you could call it a prayer. But the clear thing is you're setting your intention for
to be of
service.
service.
Sweet.
Yeah, so a prayer to be of service. Absolutely.
So I'd like to start by asking you, when was a time where you just didn't feel like you were man enough?
I'd probably say my whole life. Like it feels like such a real thing, because when I was growing up as a young boy, I was overweight and I was one of the few ethnic minorities in my area. And so I was bullied at primary school, and I'd always be picked on or the mick taken out of, whether it was racism or whether it was about my weight or body image and all of those kind of issues. And I actually didn't take it that personally, because I'd go home and my mom loved me a lot.
Oh.
And so I feel like I was literally raised by my mom. And that's one of the reasons why I never felt man enough, because my mother was the most involved parent. My dad was very much aloof, let me make my decisions, failures, choices. But my mother was always there. My mother taught me how to shave my face. She taught me my skincare routine. She taught, like, my mother was like the first person to teach me a lot of what people's dads usually teach them. And that wasn't because my dad was a bad father. It's just that was his style. And we have a great friendship now. But with my mom, she was the one involved. So I never felt man enough because I didn't have a man teaching me man things, or however you want to put it. I was always surrounded by my mother, my sister, and powerful women in my life. And I wasn't really exposed to alpha males or any of those figures.
So how's that manifest? Like, do people call you mama's boy? Did they call you names? Like,
Yeah, all of it. I remember when someone would pick on me at school, I'd go tell my mom, then my mom would come to school to be like, why are you treating my son like this? And that's like the worst nightmare for a kid, right? It's like everyone in the school is like, oh gosh, it's Jay's mom again. And, my mom can be pretty protective of me, especially when I was younger. And so she'd get right in there with the headmistress's office or the dean's office and just be like, can't have this happen. And then everyone would find out, and then everyone would laugh at you more. And so I think it ended up, I actually think it just made me more of who I am today. But when I went to high school, I started to crave more male attention. So going from that, I then went to an all-boys school.
oh, wow.
So I went to an all-boys school from the age of 11 to 18. And at that point, you have no one else's validation or recognition to get apart from other boys.
Right.
Now I want to fit in.
Did you seek or crave that attention?
Absolutely. That's when I was like, oh, now I want to be seen as strong, and I want to be seen as cool, and I want to be seen as the guy, and I want to be seen as this and that. And so I think that manifested in being quite competitive. And so I wanted to get a spot on the school's rugby team. I wanted to get a spot on the school's swimming team. I wanted to get a spot on the school's...
Did you play rugby?
I did. I think a big part of it was that masculine feeling that it gave me. And so I think it manifested in insecurities at high school. So as I got older, I actually think between 14 to 18, it manifested as insecurities of seeking validation and recognition for that which was not me. So I wasn't looking to be loved because I was empathetic and compassionate and kind, which is how my mom raised me. I was looking to be liked because I was bold and courageous and strong and physical and competitive. And so you almost start looking for validation for the things that you're not.
So you were performing
Absolutely.
every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Masculinity feels like it's a total dance, right? It's a total choreography, and you're kind of watching other men like do it, right? Like even the handshake, like how am I supposed to like do the hug, then the pull, then the
Then the what? Show us one more time.
there's like a pull, there's a tap sometimes,
The bro
double
hug.
tap.
No, it's the bro hug.
Yeah, there's a lot of different, it's very funny, not funny, but it can be entertaining as a woman to just kind of watch that and be like, I'm so happy I don't have to figure that out. But I want to come back to the, your point about service, which you really, opened up our conversation with. I feel like we overemphasize service for women, right? That you are at the service of the people around you, and that's your value in the world. And we kind of underemphasize service for men. And it seems like for you, finding service as purpose was really a very meaningful part of your identity. I'm wondering how you see, us being able to make that connection. What does service look like for men, and how is it tied to masculinity?
Yeah, I mean, I saw my mother's sacrifice growing up. So my mother was raising me and my sister deeply with love. I've always felt loved by my mother. And then she would also have her own business. So I didn't know she was an entrepreneur, but she was an entrepreneur, which was so weird because she never made herself out to be an entrepreneur. And so she had her own business. She started it so that she could work more flexibly. And she was taking care of my sister. She'd drop us to school. She'd pick us up. She'd make us dinner. She'd be working as well. And at one point became the main breadwinner in the family as well. And so I saw my mom serve or sacrifice in this way. And so I feel like I got trained by watching her and observing her. And then when I met the monks, the predominant monks that I lived with were all men, and service was at the core of their entire being. So our teachers would always tell us that the only way a culture succeeds is if everyone wants to serve everyone else. And so that was like the encouragement of that culture. And that's where it became so real to me. And for me, service and masculinity go hand in hand, but service and humanity go hand in hand. And I think it's slightly veering off from where we are, but I think it's an important point to make is when I lived as a monk, we stopped identifying as men and women. And we were asked to identify as consciousness. And that distinction and difference just kind of created this huge like weight off my shoulders, because now it's like, oh, I'm not masculine or feminine, or I'm not this or that. I'm just,
You just are.
I'm just consciousness. I'm a human. I'm a soul. I'm whatever you want to call it. I'm energy. And that energy is wired for service. And so the energy inside each of us at this table is wired for service. So the way it connects is that we've been designed to serve, but unfortunately, and I've heard that a lot from women, is that often it turns into being a martyr or going to the point of self-sacrifice and self-sabotage because of how it's encouraged more. Right. And I was speaking at this event and a man came up to me, he was probably in his 40s. And I had just told a story about how when I met the monks at 18, they shifted my perspective to service. And he said to me, he goes, "You're so lucky that you got that at 18. And I was like, yeah, I know, trust me. Like, I'm so grateful to my teachers. He goes, no, really. He goes, I only realized that someone else mattered when I had a child. And he was like, that was the first time I realized that someone apart from me mattered. And you know, he was obviously being really vulnerable, and I appreciated him sharing that, and I met it with compassion. But I think that's the case, that for a lot of men, I don't think we're trained early on in our life to realize that not just do our kids matter or our partners matter, but everyone matters and more people matter.
Or you're rewarded if you don't, right?
Yes.
Like on the rugby team, you know, sort of the culture you're describing, where you get rewarded if you are individualistic, competitive, and, you know, have this kind of attitude. And again, for women, it's the opposite. We get heavily punished when we take on those characteristics.
That's true.
Yeah, but that ungendering is so interesting, right? That happened, and that surplus of energy that you felt is something that we could all access, right? If we weren't weighed down by these gender stereotypes.
It's like the freedom, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying that you had sight, you had knowledge growing up by your mother, and you kind of held that to yourself.
I gave it up because I saw it as less than. So it's not even that I held it back. I gave it up and substituted it.
You traded it in for your man card.
Correct, for this toxicity, which then obviously encouraged more people to go down that path. And then I think the best thing I've done to try and remove that is when I became a monk, I became the mentor to a lot of young men in London. And those young men are still involved in my life. So I've known them since they were like 16 to 18 years old. They're all like 26 to 28 years old now. And so I feel like those 25 guys, they know who they are. Like those are like my favorite success story, because I just see them make amazing decisions with their partners, their careers. Like most of them in relationships now, and I see the husbands and the fathers they're becoming. And I mean, it's you know, many of them become fathers before I am one, and it's just inspiring that they're also leading that way and showing me that people don't have to make as bad a mistakes or go as far as I did.
Right.
Where do you go? Like when you're struggling, you know, when you and your wife are having a fight, or if you ever have a fight, I don't know if you guys have fights.
Lots.
Where do you go and share that? Because you are a spiritual guru to millions of people now, right? And in many ways, and so many people look to you for advice. But who do you go to? Where do you go when you need help?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to address the arguing with my wife, because I think that's such a good thing to talk about. This is what I find fascinating about the way humans are wired. And I'll give an example. So my wife's been my first guest every year when we launch a new season of the podcast. So she's been on the podcast 3 times, the guest we've had on the most. And every time we'll do like a 1.5 hour episode of everything we struggled with that year. And so we talk about like the mistakes, the failures, the things that went wrong. And the number one comment will be relationship goals. And the number one comment will be couple goals. And what I found is that the human desire to be inspired and want someone to project perfection onto anyone is so strong that my honest comment back is always, please listen to what we just said.
Yeah.
And
You're not
I'm
listening.
Right? Like, and not in a not listening and like, and I know you don't mean this, not in an attacking way, but just like, please just listen to me. Like, I just told you that when I first started dating my wife, I thought she wanted to be wooed like in the movies of Hollywood. And I got it all wrong because I was doing all this flashy stuff. And my wife's actually a simple person, did not want any of that. I just told you.
Do you know
that.
we have the same story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't.
I didn't know that. I don't think
when
we
we had
ever
our
talked-
double date, we didn't talk about it.
We did not talk
It's the
about that.
identical story.
Really?
Yeah.
I love
No,
that.
keep going. Please keep going.
So my point's being like, if I've just told you that actually for the first 2 years of our marriage, 2 years of our relationship, we didn't understand each other. Don't just look at us and go like, oh yeah, you guys got green eyes and they match. And so you match. And like, there's just so much more to it. And I find that
So reductive.
as humans, we so want people to be perfect that we create a pedestal, even if someone's telling you the truth. And I think if we just sit and all listen to each other, then A, we won't be let down by people, and B, we won't put people on the pedestal. But who do I go to? So the first thing, I definitely turn to my texts. And I know we share this in common, but the Bhagavad Gita has been such a companion and guide in my life from so long, since I was 18, that I turn to it all the time. My monk teacher, who's now 70 years old, who you actually met when you came
oh
to
my
my
God,
home.
so sweet.
Yeah, when he came to my home. So you've met him. And he's now 70 years old. He grew up in Chicago and hitchhiked to India at the age of 19.
The story is insane.
Yeah,
it's an insane story.
And so when I'm struggling with something in a major way, when it's like a real like I feel like it's a tragedy at this point, then he's the person I go to, because he always helps me see the reality and see the truth. Again, there's monks in between that journey. So he's like kind of at the top of the order, but then there's other ones that are more like older brothers, and I can be more vulnerable with them. And I don't feel like.
So you have monks on like
On speed dial.
phone a friend
Yes.
monks.
And they're there to help you like just recalibrate, bring yourself to account.
So for men who don't have monks on speed dial, what is your advice for them to do business in a more spiritual way?
So spirituality and business is an interesting concept, because a lot of people today see it as an oxymoron or, mutually exclusive. And the truth is that spirituality is so powerful that it actually spreads across everything. And I know all of you understand that, but it's like, if spirituality is what we all say it is, then it has the purity and the power to spread across anything. And again, going back to our previous theme, the key element is this for service of humanity, for others, or is this in the service of myself? Now, that's a fine line.
Yeah.
And I've been on the wrong side of that line plenty of times. So there's plenty of times when I assess options and opportunities in front of me, and I realize I'm only taking that option because there's ego involved. I'm only taking that option because there's an opportunity, or there's a big payout, or there's a nice dollar sign next to it. And I'm only doing it for that. And I've said yes to stuff like that plenty of times to know that I'm not perfect. But the awareness is what I would encourage people to do, is having the ability to be like, here are the 3-4 options in my life right now. Let me write a word above them, which is the intention of why I'm choosing that. And if the word isn't love or service, it's not going to feel good after I finish it. And so that's what I would encourage people to do, as a reflection without needing anyone in their life or anyone around them.
I love that. I love that there's this, I don't know the quote exactly, but one of the central figures in the Baha'i faith talks about Abdu'l-Baha, that when you are suffering and when you are going through something and you cannot find a way out, to immediately go be of service to another. Because when you are service to others, you find that your own pains and things just dissipate through that. So when you talked about earlier about being wired for service,
Yes.
so while I think that, also there are some people that are put into service to others, not to be of pure service because they're forced to be put there. Women are some. wives oftentimes, unless we do something different. I have these conversations with Liz all the time. The service that I've always seen with women in my life, my mother, grandmother, all of them, there was a lot of sexism going on as well. Not necessarily by my father. Certainly, I want to say no, but all of the stuff that was being experienced. So I think that this idea of service being elevated, but service being forced, how do we really talk about
beautiful.
And how does service and capitalism, right, like which feel at odds? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, there's a beautiful statement by Peter Diamandis, and he says that we should redefine the word billionaire to be someone who impacts the lives of 1 billion people. Now, whether you think of that from spirituality or from a money perspective, the wealthiest people in the world are creating something that services the most amount of people, and the scale of the problem you're solving and the depth of the issue is how much money you make. So if someone created a cure for cancer and was able to scale it across the world, they would probably be the wealthiest person on the planet because they created something out of service. Now, you may say, well, Jay, no, many people out of wanting the money will figure that out. I'd say that they may, but I'm hoping that on that journey, they'll upgrade and their desire and their intention will be purified. And I think this was what I loved learning from the Bhagavad Gita, which was this idea of there is no pure intention. All intentions are percentages and divided. So when you first start something, you may have a 70% pure intention, but there's 30% of ego in that.
Yeah.
Or when you start, it's probably the other way around, 25% good intention and 75% of ego, but it's purified in the process. So even if you look at people who've set out their lives, and I work with many of them who set out at the beginning of their lives to become wealthy and famous, when they became wealthy and famous, they then realized that wasn't the point, and they were purified in the process of achieving their goal. And so the way I think about it is that in a capitalist society, even the people that are succeeding because of service, whether it's conscious or not conscious, whether it's intentional or unintentional, they're still only successful. Like Amazon is successful because we all want its service. Like we want to be served by Amazon, right? And I'm not promoting or de-promoting Amazon. I'm just making the point that because it serves a daily need for the majority of the population, they are financially successful because of it. Does that make sense, Liz? I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Well,
and I see your face, so I'm like, I want to.
Well, because I feel like it doesn't purify. Like Jeff Bezos. Actually, I don't care about pissing off Jeff Bezos. I'm doing it with love. Jeff Bezos. I don't have any evidence that he was purified by becoming a billionaire. Like he still has 28 bathrooms, but then he's preventing his workers from unionizing, right? So, I guess I'm still wondering how to reconcile those things. And we've talked about the intersection of masculinity and risk, about how, women are willing to take big risks when it comes to redistribution, when it comes to more taxation, when it comes to the environment. And it's actually men who, and particularly white men, that I'm just speaking the data.
Hey, I'm sitting here.
It's particularly white men because, the 10 most wealthiest people are white men. They have the most to lose. So I think about that all the time. I'm bringing this up because it's something that I grapple with.
Yeah.
Where I feel like my heart is in the right place, and 100% I've known when it's not, or when I've done something I'm like, this was not for the right reason. How do we reconcile those things? I think.
And whether anyone's been purified or not, and where their journey of life goes, we'll find out, right? With everyone. I really believe that everyone's on this recurring journey of life, and it's all to get people to realize that service is the only goal. And we kind of have to keep having life experiences and failures and shortcomings and issues and everything going wrong to only remind you of that, and that being the only satisfying thing. The way you reconcile it is only through stillness and solitude. Like if you don't spend enough time alone every day and try to hear yourself and try to hear the words of your spiritual teachers, guides, texts, then you are only going to hear the noise from society outside, and that's what you'll end up following. Or if you're switching off the noise to listen to a podcast like this and all the other episodes that I've I've seen the guests you've had on and the types of conversations you're having on. You're all performing a service. And by the way, everyone who's listening is also serving by learning. So it's not only the giver that is serving, the receiver is also serving. I think the bigger challenge is also that we've just lacked examples of that. And so to me, it's like I would be traveling with one of our senior monk leaders. You know, this gentleman's 70 years old. I'm like, I don't know, 21 years old. And every day we'd wake up in the morning and he would bow down before me on the floor to honor the soul that's within my heart. And I would do the same back, but he would always beat me to it. And there was no one watching. There were no fanfare. There was no audience. There was no one to do it for. I wasn't Jay Shetty. Like, I was just a kid who's 21 years old. And that's how we were taught to behave with each other, with that much level of respect. Now, he would have done that with anyone in the room. So the reason I'm sharing that is like, when I experienced that level of masculine or whatever you want to call that, like, you know, when I experienced that, it gave me faith that a man could be extremely powerful by being extremely humble.
Yeah.
That a man could penetrate my heart by being really kind and caring and compassionate. But if you've never experienced that, how are you to believe that that's possible?
Yeah.
I think the first step is to seek and find. Like, I think it's hard to tell anyone the formula for how to navigate that without them finding a purpose that is bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard for anyone to navigate life. Sometimes your purpose bigger than yourself becomes your family and your love for your family. And that's as far and wide as your mind wants to go. And that's beautiful. Yeah. And for some people, it becomes the world. And for some people, it becomes their town and their city. But everyone has to have something, you know, those beautiful words of Martin Luther King of, you know, if you have nothing to die for, you have nothing to live for. Like, that to me is the clear purpose of life, where we have to seek out what it is that we really care about and what we really believe in. And that can be your family. That's totally fine. Like, this doesn't have to be like I'm going to become an activist and change the world conversation. This is, I care about the quality of life my family has. But I think about quality based on the depth of their experience of life, not just what they have. And I'm going to live my life, or try and live my life in that way. And so to me, the first step is to seek mentors, coaches, guides, guidance. It has to be. It always is. I had the fortune of interviewing Walter Isaacson. He's famously known to write the biographies of the biggest icons of all time. So he wrote the official biography of Leonardo da Vinci, Einstein, Steve Jobs. Like, you know, just it's insane. And he worked at CNN and Time before that. And he wrote a new book about a lady named Jennifer Doudna, who is the founder of gene editing. Now, she's a female scientist who was told by her school teachers that women don't become scientists. Right? Like, women can't be scientists. She just won the Nobel Prize for her discovery. So amazing. And he just wrote a book about her life. It's called Codebreaker. The reason why I'm sharing all of that is that some girl's going to pick up that book, or guy, both, or anyone, or they are going to pick up that book, and they are going to find their role model in that book. We may not have a monk on speed dial, we may not have met a monk when you were 18, but you're going to find when you start searching and looking. And when you find that, you're going to read it, you're going to internalize it, and it's going to change how you think. And I just feel that encouraging people to find coaches, guides, and mentors is the best thing I can do, because there's no one we admire that doesn't have that. Whether they're an athlete, whether they're a singer, whether they're a musician, whether they're a videographer or editor, everyone's had mentors, guides, and coaches, but it's become so far removed from our lives today that everyone thinks they have to figure it out for themselves. And that's where the mess is created from. It sounds like an obvious point, but it's almost like we obviously haven't pushed it enough.
Right.
Because as a man, to take another person as your mentor also requires you to have humility. You've got to forgive yourself. You got to be compassionate to yourself. So the simple act of taking on a mentor actually does more for your masculinity than anything else.
And also being a mentor.
Yes.
Right? You reach a place and you have your success, or you've achieved something, and then being of service to that person who's sending the elevator back down. But it's the biggest myth of masculinity that we have to do it by ourselves.
Yes.
Like that that we can't ask for help. We can't ask for guidance. We can't ask for those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you something real quick, Jay, because I don't know how you do it. And social media. I want to talk about social media for a second. We talked about it a little bit when I joined your podcast, but we know what social media in many ways does to our brains. We get dopamine hits left and right, much more than, we ever have in human history. Like, dislike, followers, comments, all of which are contributing, I think, to a different kind of pandemic, which is like extremely low self-worth, seeking external validation, and everybody wanting to become the center of attention, an influencer, to have influence. And then you mix in like what's becoming trendy or popular or woke in culture. And then you have service, right? And these lines get very blurred. Like, I've struggled with like, do I post that? Do I not post that? Like, oh, that didn't get as many likes. And I still have those thoughts. And I just imagine 15-year-olds and 12-year-olds now that are getting social media and all of these things. And I remember watching this, like, I swear she was 8 years old. She was by herself in a CVS doing a TikTok holding the phone by herself. And I was really confused. And I looked at that and my heart broke just thinking about the performative aspect of what social media does. How have you stayed above water? How have you not been affected, or are you ever affected? And I guess that's my question is, are you also affected by if something doesn't have a lot of likes or if a podcast doesn't have a lot of downloads? Because you seem impermeable in that way. Like, you have the teachings, you're so rooted in the teachings and in your meditation and your practice that it's like you're not shaken by the outside world, but you are teaching people this wisdom, this ancient wisdom, but yet you're doing it from the swamp. How do you stay out of it? And do you struggle ever?
You fall in and you fall in again.
Have you fallen in?
All the time. Social media was my last resort to try and share a message that I deeply believed the world needed. And so if I had it my way, I would never have taken to social media. I would have done it through one of these official channels that wouldn't give me a chance. And I think people don't think that. People think, oh yeah, you joined social media because you want to get a It's like, I joined social media because I didn't know any other way to spread the message. So going back to mistakes on social media or failures, I've fallen into it so many times that I fall into on a daily basis. If your life revolves around serving through social media, you have to become phenomenal at social media strategy. You can't separate the two. You have to. The problem is when the strategy overtakes the sincerity. The problem is when the strategy overtakes the creativity or overshadows the creativity. The problem is when the strategy just becomes a game and now you're just living in this fake world you've created. And that's the problem. When you just look at the likes and you don't look at the comments, when you look at the views, but you don't look at the engagement. And when I say engagement, I mean the depth of it. What are people saying? How are they feeling? That's what humanizes it again for me. So that's what I'm holding on to, is the humanizing of it, of seeing like, how is this genuinely having a human impact, not a data impact? And I think that's where our mindset as strategists versus spiritualists goes, is as a strategist, you're meant to think data, but as a spiritualist, you're meant to think depth. And so you can't let data overshadow depth. And what I love about algorithms is that they always keep you humble. You will never beat the algorithm. It will always keep you humble. So if you're actually doing it for likes and love and hearts, you will give up. But if you're doing it because you just want to find what is going to connect with people, what is going to resonate, what is going to cut through, then that's something that will keep you humble in the process of it, because you'll never win.
You've been able to separate how a video does or performs
from
your own self-worth.
Oh, for sure.
And I think that is really kind of the key in the question for when that TikTok or that Instagram video turns off, they're left with themselves.
Yeah.
And, one of the things you teach is being with yourself. But if they don't know how to be with themselves, so I guess this is an opportunity. I'm asking you to to talk to them if someone's listening right now who's struggling with that, because I have struggled with it, especially from a service perspective. Like, I'm here to be of service. Why am I making this about? Why do I care? Why should I care? I don't care. Do I care? I do care. Shit, I care too much. No, that didn't get, and it's like, should I post that? No, but this is my platform. I want to post whatever I want. I want to post a picture of the sunset but no one's going to like the picture of the sunset, Justin. So post something. I've had these conversations with myself, and the fact that I'm having them drive me crazy. And you just strike me as somebody who doesn't have them as much. And maybe that's because you have a sense of self.
The practical answer is all the work goes in thinking about something up front. So when you set your intention when you're creating a piece of content. So my book's the biggest, deepest, most meaningful thing I put out in the world, in my opinion. And I spent a lot of time writing it, researching it.
I remember,
thinking
man, you
about
were doing
the
it
experience.
every day. You were on a mission, 3-4 hours a day. You were
literally,
yeah.
And I knew that I wanted science in it and I wanted monk research in it. And so I had monks researching. I had a scientific researcher. Like, it was a real team project to get it to be what I wanted it to be. And I put in all the work up front because my intention was, if you create something with the love, with the service, with the intention of that, then that's what people are going to feel. Whereas if I create it with the intention of going viral, or which you can't actually do, because viral by nature and by what it is means that you can't predict it. Like, people can do that. People decide that. With the book, if you're obsessed with X result, it ruins the process.
Yeah.
So for me, when I'm in the process, I really shut my windows and I close the doors, and I'm like, this process has to be as pure as possible,
yeah.
as possible. So it's not 100%, but it's as good as it can get. And when we look at, and when we talk about how do we share this with the world, let's also make the process really good. Are we sharing in the right places? Are we getting it right? And then when you share it, you know that you've done everything you possibly could to make it worthwhile. And if it doesn't work, you can take that because you've done everything. The problem is when you put something out with the desire of, it's going to do great. I know I masterminded this. It's perfect. And then it doesn't do well. Then it affects you. Whereas when you've built all your self-worth in the process of that. And so I sent my publishers an email, and I'm saying this because I'm proud of myself for doing this. And I'm going to say that here. I sent them an email the day before the book came out, and we had no idea what was going to happen or anything. And I said, I just want to thank you for this process. It's been the best process I've ever had. I love you guys. It's been amazing. You've been the best team I've ever worked with. I really appreciate you, from the editor down to the fact checker down to this, whatever, everyone on the team. And I just want you to know I'm already proud of what we've achieved. And I sent that email off to them. And I remember the president of the company that I work with, he replied to me, he goes, Jay, we never get one of these emails the day before the book comes out. He was like, we always get this if the book does well or whatever. And I was like, no, I genuinely feel so proud of what we've achieved already. Whatever happens, happens. I had my UK publisher tell me, Jay, you know what? We're probably not going to hit number one on the Sunday Times in the UK because, there's some big hitters in the UK coming out this week. Are you okay with that? I was like, dude, I have written the best book I possibly could. We've done the best launch that I probably could have done. I couldn't have done anymore. I'm good. Like, whatever. I don't care. And it's like, to me, that's the only way to not care, is that you put all your heart into the creation. So that's the practical answer.
Wow.
The philosophical answer and the more spiritual answer is, I'm flawed. I do seek validation in what people think of me. I do get upset if someone doesn't like my videos and like someone else's. And I forgive myself, I'm compassionate, and I start over again. Like, that's just the real answer. Like, that's just the truth.
I love that.
I mess up, I fall down. I get that I do get worried about, will I be relevant next year? I do get worried about, like, will people care about me? I do get worried about, like, have I said anything good on this podcast right now? Like, is there anything that I've said that is actually even worth this podcast? I do think about that, like, every time. I think about that every time I record a solo episode of my podcast. And I think about that all the time. But what do? I allow myself to feel that. I allow myself to experience it. I forgive myself for judging myself. And then I start again. And I start every day as if it was new. And my wife and I have this amazing ability, we both have it, is that we can go to sleep, forget the night before, and start again. And I think my memory literally does that. I erase all of my failures and mistakes from the day before and just start afresh every day, because it's the only way I know to allow myself to have another go at it. Just the idea of allowing yourself to have some compassion for yourself. And I think everyone who's sitting out there who's judging themselves, accept that you judge yourself, be compassionate, but then seek to redirect that energy. Whatever table you're at, and whoever's at that table is what you judge yourself by. So when we heard that famous quote of you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, actually what the truth is, your values become the average of the 5 people and their values.
I love that. When we talked, you and I did like a pandemic check-in with like a man enough kind of check-in. And you had admitted that you were addicted to video games for a little bit.
I was.
And that was big. In the book, I talk about, an ongoing struggle I've had with porn since I was, a kid. And you said it caught you by surprise that you were addicted. You found yourself like, taking all of this emotion and just playing video games, and hours would pass by.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Which one, by the way?
So FIFA, NBA 2K.
All right, I'm with you.
2K21 now I have. And Assassin's Creed, which is really messed up.
Wait. A monk?
Playing Assassin's Creed,
All
yes,
right.
yes.
Right.
So I'm curious, how bad did it get, and what pulled you out, or is that still an ongoing thing that you're just struggling with a little bit, or is it a
Oh my gosh! So yeah, we just found out it was the pandemic. I realized we were going to be stuck indoors. I thought maybe this is going to last a month. That's what I thought, and I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do at this time? Like a lot of things were getting canceled at the time and things like that. And we had my wife's friend staying with us, so they would always be spending time together and everything. So I was pretty much on my own. And instead of meditating more or reading more, I ordered a PlayStation, which, by the way, I hadn't played video games for 10 years. Like, I just hadn't. I hadn't watched TV properly, watched a series on TV. I'd watch movies. I love movies. I hadn't watched a TV show for 10 years. But I literally would sit there and play hours and hours of video games. And I think I didn't stop playing for it took 3 to 4 weeks before I realized that I'd been playing video games for 8 hours a day. 8 hours. Time was wasted. I thought I was dealing well with what was going on, but actually I was just using that as my escape to what was actually happening in the world. And I know it sounds stupid. It's like, oh, video games, but it's not. It's terrible.
No.
I mean, when I would play Assassin's Creed, I would walk out there. My wife was just like, you look like you've just exited a war. Are you okay? She would literally look at me like...
Our camera crew's laughing. They're like, oh, I feel that.
She was literally like, are you... she would see me come out of the room, I'd come out of the cave of she's like, are you okay? I don't think that game's good for you. I don't think that game's good for your energy. And it was 3 to 4 weeks in where I realized I was like, God, the world's suffering right now. I should be serving. I'm sitting here playing video games. But... I have to allow myself and cut myself some slack that was my escape at the time.
Yeah.
I just hadn't slowed down and I hadn't stopped for the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
I hadn't allowed myself to have any downtime because I was building and serving and creating. That was my outlet. You still realize that it starts to damage your relationships. My mom was like, why are you not calling? I'm not calling my mom and I'm playing 8 hours of video games.
Yeah.
I'm not calling my sister and I'm playing 8 hours of video games. We're not spending time with my wife. And,
it's kind of like anything that doesn't have moderation involved.
Yeah.
Totally.
Then is toxic, right? You drink too much water and then it's toxic.
My therapist put it this way. If it's fine, it's acceptable behavior if you're doing it and afterwards you don't feel any shame.
Yes. Right. Yes.
But if you feel bad or terrible and yet you do it again, then you should look at it.
Well, there are bad things men can do that they don't feel shame about.
Well,
yeah,
I'm for somebody who's by the time you get to therapy and you're actually working on that thing and you're like, hey, you're trying to understand it. Right. By that point, it's like, okay, well, this is probably unhealthy for you if you're that reflective and you're already there. Yes.
Right.
The answer is yes.
It's interesting that it seems to be the women in your life that sort of pointed that out.
Always. The women, my mother, my sister, and from my wife, I've just learned I dedicate my book to her because she is more monk than I'll ever be. And that's so humbling. When we got married, I was like the guy who'd been a monk and meditating for all these years. And even some of my spiritual friends were like, oh, you can't marry her. She's new to spirituality, et cetera, et cetera. And my wife wakes up earlier than I do. She meditates for longer than I do. She's amazing. She's far more spiritual than I'll ever be. And I love that because I need that.
She is amazing.
Yeah, and I need that. If she wasn't that, maybe I wouldn't be who I am today. Maybe I would have got more deviated from the path and lost my way.
Jay, you're incredible. We're going to go to these last questions. Welcome to this week's Man Enough Podcast Rapid Fire Questions. Liz, do you want to start?
All right, Jay.
These are rapid fire questions.
Are you ready? When is the last time that you cried?
It was probably when I was, it was probably this. Because I don't live in the same country as my mom anymore, and because of the pandemic, I don't get to see her as much anymore. I used to go back regularly. I feel like whenever I'm leaving London and my mom cries, I cry because it's my mom. Like, I love her. Like, she's done everything for me. And the thing about love is there's no way of repaying it. So you can only keep trying. And I think that that's the beauty of love, and also the hard part of love is that you can't repay real love. And I feel like I'm always in debt to my mom in a good way. And so, I'd say that.
Tell me something that other people value that you don't.
I'd say it's probably being understood. I'm okay with being misunderstood.
Wow.
I just think it's the reality. I just don't think you will ever be understood by everyone. And so it's okay. Like, I don't value being understood anymore.
I love that.
I used to love being understood.
I want to take that as a superpower.
Yeah.
I'm going to add one. What are you afraid of?
I'm afraid of not reaching my potential. I'm genuinely afraid of that. I do think about that. Like, I think about the future, and I'm like, I don't want to die having thought that I didn't try my best to do everything that I was meant to do. And my teacher told me something once which set the pedestal of potential much higher. And he asked me once, he said, well, what are you doing right now as an update? And so I was telling him, I was like, I'm doing this podcast and we're launching this book. And I was just sharing it out of love and gratitude to him. And he said to me, he goes, for all of these things that you're doing, I have no expectation, but I simply demand the purity of your heart. And I was just like, oh, that's a lot harder. and that's my biggest fear, that I don't live up to that, because I feel like I would have wasted all the love that he's given me over the years, and the amount of investment that these teachers have put into a random kid from London who is on his way to do all the stupid things that people do. And they've loved me through so much. And it upsets me to think that I mess it up. So, yeah.
When was the last time you apologized to someone?
Today, to my wife. We were doing a video together, and I was rushing to come here or somewhere else. And I had the worst energy, and she stopped me and she looked me in the face and she was like, are you okay? Like, what's up? Like, I can tell that you're just frustrated to be here, but you need to do this right now. And are you okay with that? And then I was like, all right, let's just do it. I don't like your energy right now. And then I went back to her and I gave her a hug and I was like, I'm really sorry. Like, I'm just, I've had a lot on this past week and whatever. So yeah, that was
Thank you for sharing that. And the final question, what does it mean to be man enough?
Oh, I think, in my opinion, what it means to be man enough is there's a beautiful statement by Russell Barkley where he said that people who need the most love often ask for it in the most unloving ways. And I think what it means to be man enough is to be able to approach everyone with that love, recognizing that the pain they're causing you or anyone else is coming from a place of them being unloved at some point in their life.
Well, Jay Shetty, you, my friend, are man enough. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you,
here with
Thank
us,
you so
brother.
much. Thank you, Liz. Thanks,
Thank you
Jamie.
so
Thanks
much
for
for
having
doing this in person
Thank you.
too, man.
I love
I know
this.
you had to move a lot of stuff around to make this happen, so thank you so much.
This was so special. I learned so much.
So sweet.